Queen Zelvaria stood on the landing platform of her palace, watching the human transport ship descend through the purple clouds of her throne world. The wind pulled at her silver robes, and her 4 eyes narrowed against the bright afternoon sun. Behind her, a dozen of her finest guards stood in perfect formation, their plasma rifles gleaming. She had ruled the Cathari Empire for 32 cycles. 47 star systems answered to her command. The greatest fleet in the known galaxy flew her banner. She had crushed rebellions, negotiated impossible treaties, and built her people into a power that made other species tremble. And now her council had demanded she take a husband. The peace treaty with humanity was still fragile. 3 years of careful diplomacy had ended the border conflicts, but trust between their species remained thin. Her advisors believed the symbolic union would strengthen the alliance. A human consort would show the galaxy that the Cathari and humans stood together. Zelvaria had agreed, though she found the entire arrangement distasteful. She did not need a partner. She had never needed anyone. The transport ship touched down with a soft hiss of engines. Steam rose from the landing gear as the ramp lowered. Zelvaria straightened her spine and prepared to meet whatever politician or military officer the humans had sent her up. Man walked down the ramp. He was not what she expected. He carried a small cloth bag over one shoulder. His clothes were simple brown pants, a faded blue shirt, warm boots that had seen many miles. He was tall for a human, with broad shoulders and hands that looked like they knew hard work. His hair was dark brown, cut short and practical. His face was plain but kind, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. He stopped at the bottom of the ramp and looked up at her with warm brown eyes. Then he smiled, a gentle, easy smile that held no trace of fear or ambition. "Hello," he said. "I'm Danny Cole. I guess I'm your new husband." Zelvaria stared at him. Her chief advisor, a tall Cathari named Verthan, leaned close to her ear. "Your Majesty, there must be some mistake. This cannot be the consort they promised." She silenced him with a look. Then she walked down the steps toward the human, her guards following close behind. "You are Danny Cole?" she asked, her voice cool and formal. "The consort sent by the Human Alliance?" "That's me." He shifted his bag on his shoulder. "Sorry, I don't look like much. I was a cargo hauler before this. Spent most of my life moving supplies between colonies out in the frontier. Place called New Montana, if you've heard of it." She had not heard of it. It sounded like exactly the kind of backwater settlement to produce men like this. "The Human Alliance sent me a cargo hauler as a husband?" Danny's smile never wavered. "I know it seems strange, but they said you needed someone who wouldn't cause trouble. Someone quiet. Someone who could stay out of your way and let you do your job." He shrugged. "That's pretty much my specialty. Staying out of the way." Verthan made a sound of disgust. The guards exchanged glances. Zelvaria could already imagine the whispers that would spread through her court. The mighty queen married to a farmer. A nobody. A joke. She should have been angry. She should have sent him back and demanded someone worthy of her station. Instead, she found herself studying his face. There was something in his eyes, something quiet and deep that did not match his simple words. He stood before the most powerful woman in 47 star systems, surrounded by armed guards, and he was completely calm. Not arrogant, not pretending, just calm, like a man who had made peace with himself long ago. "Follow me," she said. "I will show you to your quarters." The first month was strange. Danny Cole moved into the eastern wing of the palace, in chambers that were comfortable but far from the royal suites. He made no complaints. He asked for nothing. He spent his days walking through the palace gardens, learning the names of plants and flowers from the groundskeepers. He helped in the kitchen sometimes, washing dishes alongside servants who did not know what to make of him. The nobles mocked him openly. They called him the Queen's pet human and laughed about the cargo hauler who'd somehow stumbled into royalty. Danny heard every whisper. He smiled and said nothing. Zelvaria watched him from a distance at first. She had duties that consumed her day's meetings with admirals, negotiations with trading partners, the endless work of running an empire. She told herself she had no time for her strange, new husband. But she noticed things. She noticed that he woke every day before the sun rose, his body moving with quiet discipline. She noticed that he read constantly history, science, military strategy, pulling books from the palace library that most nobles had never touched. She noticed that when he walked through the gardens, his eyes swept the tree line and the rooftops, always watching, always aware. One evening, she found him sitting alone on the balcony, staring up at the stars. His face was different in that moment. The easy smile was gone. In its place was something older and heavier, a sadness that seemed to go all the way down to his bones. "What are you looking at?" she asked, stepping onto the balcony beside him. He did not startle at her voice. He simply turned and looked at her with those quiet brown eyes. "Just remembering," he said. "Some nights, the stars look different. Some nights, they look like old friends." She did not understand what he meant, but she sat down beside him anyway, and they watched the stars together in silence. The months passed. Slowly, without meaning to, Zelvaria began to look forward to seeing him. He remembered small details about her favorite tea, the anniversary of her mother's death, the color of flowers that reminded her of childhood. He asked about her day and actually listened to her answers. He never asked for power or influence. He never tried to use her. He was kind. Simply, honestly kind. She began to wonder about the man she had married. The humans claimed they had sent her someone invisible, someone harmless. But harmless men did not move the way Danny moved. Harmless men did not have eyes that old. One night, she asked him about his life before, about the cargo ships and the frontier colonies. Danny smiled that gentle smile and told her stories about hauling supplies through empty space, about long nights alone with nothing but stars for company. The stories were good. They were detailed and warm and exactly what a cargo hauler would remember. But his hands told a different story. She had seen those hands steady a frightened servant during an earthquake without a tremor. She had seen those hands catch a falling glass with reflexes faster than her. Elite guards. Those were not the hands of a man who had spent his life moving boxes. Zelvaria looked at her husband, this quiet, smiling, impossible man, and wondered what secrets he was hiding. And somewhere deep in her heart, she realized she was not just curious anymore. She cared about him. That terrified her more than any enemy fleet. 6 months had passed since Danny Cole arrived on the Cathari throne world. 6 months of quiet mornings and peaceful evenings. 6 months of watching her strange human husband tend gardens and read books and smile at everyone he met. Zelvaria had grown comfortable with him. Perhaps too comfortable. It was a small thing that first made her suspicious. A dinner with visiting diplomats from the Orion sector. The conversation turned to military history, and one of the diplomats mentioned the first contact war between humanity and the Vrekenar Dominion. "A brutal conflict," the diplomat said, swirling wine in his glass. "The humans lost so many soldiers in those early years. They were not prepared for Vrekenar savagery." Danny had been sitting quietly at the far end of the table, barely noticed by anyone. But Zelvaria saw his hand tighten around his fork. Just for a moment. Just a flicker of something dark crossing his face before the gentle smile returned. "Indeed," Danny said softly. "They were not prepared." The diplomat nodded and moved on to other topics. But Zelvaria did not stop watching her husband. She saw how he set down his fork and did not pick it up again. She saw how his eyes went somewhere far away, somewhere that had nothing to do with this peaceful dining hall. That night, she could not sleep. 2 weeks later, the assassins came. It was past midnight when they breached the palace walls. 3 of them, moving like shadows through the gardens. The palace sensors detected them too late. By the time the alarm sounded, they were already inside the royal wing. Zelvaria woke to the sound of her door crashing open. She reached for the weapon under her pillow, but strong hands grabbed her and pulled her behind the bed. It was Danny. He moved with speed that should have been impossible. One moment he was beside her. The next he was between her and the doorway, his body positioned to shield her from any attack. His stance was perfect, weight balanced, hands ready, eyes tracking the shadows with practiced precision. "Stay down," he whispered. His voice was different, harder, colder. The first assassin came through the door. Danny moved like water. He caught the attacker's wrist, twisted, and the assassin's own blade buried itself in his throat. The body hit the floor before Zelvaria could process what she had seen. The second assassin appeared at the window. Danny threw something, a small decorative statue, from the nightstand, and it struck the assassin's temple with terrible accuracy. The third assassin never made it past the doorway. Danny's hands found his neck, and there was a sound Zelvaria would never forget. 3 assassins. 10 seconds. All of them dead. Danny stood in the middle of her bedroom, breathing steadily, surrounded by bodies. Then he turned to her, and the coldness in his eyes melted back into concern. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She stared at him. Her elite guards finally arrived, rushing into the room with weapons drawn, only to find the threat already eliminated by a cargo hauler in sleeping clothes. "I am fine," Zelvaria said slowly. "How did you do that?" Danny looked at the bodies, then back at her. That gentle smile appeared again, but it did not reach his eyes. "Instinct," he said. "I got lucky." He was lying. She knew it with absolute certainty. No cargo hauler moved like that. No lucky farmer killed 3 trained assassins with his bare hands in the time it took to draw breath. She did not press him that night, but she began to watch him more carefully. A month later, Bazan brought her a report. Her spymaster was old and patient, with scars that told of decades spent uncovering secrets. He placed a thin datapad on her desk and waited. "I searched every database the Cathari Empire can access," Rathan said. "Human Alliance records, colony registrations, shipping manifests, employment histories. I searched for 3 weeks. Zelvaria picked up the datapad. It was empty. "There is no Danny Cole from New Montana," Rathan continued. "There is no record of anyone by that name working as a cargo hauler in the frontier sectors. No birth certificate. No identification documents. No shipping licenses." He leaned closer. "Your Majesty, the man you married does not exist." The datapad felt heavy in her hands. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that whoever Danny Cole truly is, the humans went to great lengths to erase him. This is not simple privacy. This is the kind of erasure that intelligence agencies perform for their most valuable assets." Berthan's eyes were hard. "You have married a ghost, Your Majesty, and I do not know whose ghost he is." That evening, Zelvaria found Danny in his usual spot, the palace garden, kneeling in the dirt, tending to a row of flowers from earth. He looked up as she approached, and his smile was warm and open and completely false. "Beautiful evening," he said. "The soil here is different from home, but these flowers are adapting well. Who are you?" The question hung in the air between them. Danny's hands stopped moving. The smile faded from his face, replaced by something careful and watchful. "I told you. I'm Danny Cole, cargo hauler from... There is no Danny Cole." She stepped closer, her voice sharp. "I had my spymaster search every record. You do not exist. There is no cargo hauler, no colony, no history. Nothing. She knelt in the dirt across from him, bringing her face close to his. I am not a fool. I know you are hiding something. I want the truth. For a long moment, Danny did not speak. He looked at her with those brown eyes, and she saw the mask slip away. Beneath the gentle farmer was something else. Something tired and old and heavy with secrets. You're right, he said quietly. Danny Cole is not my real name. The cargo hauler story is a cover. The humans created it for me. Why? Because they needed someone to protect you. Someone who could watch over you without being noticed. Someone invisible. He looked down at his hands, still dirty from the garden. That's what I do, Zell. I'm good at being invisible. I'm good at being nobody. That is not an answer. Who are you? What are you hiding? Danny met her eyes. The gentleness was gone now. In its place was something harder, something that had seen terrible things and survived them. I can't tell you everything. Not yet. There are people who would hurt you if they knew what I really am. People who would use you to get to me. He reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm and steady. But I promise you this, everything I've done has been to keep you safe. The garden, the books, the quiet life. All of it was real. I wasn't pretending to care about you. That part was never a lie. Zalvaria looked at the man before her. The ghost. The stranger. The husband she did not know at all. When will you tell me the truth? She asked. When I know you're safe, he said. When the danger passes. What danger? Danny looked up at the darkening sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. The kind of danger that follows men like me, he said. The kind that never really goes away. She should have demanded answers. She should have called her guards and had him locked away until he confessed everything. Instead, she sat beside him in the dirt and helped him tend the flowers. Because somewhere beneath the lies and secrets, she still believed that the kindness was real, and she was terrified of losing it. The Vreckener Dominion had been silent for 30 years. After the First Contact War, humanity had broken them, shattered their fleets, burned their forward bases, pushed them back into the dark reaches of space where no civilized species dared to travel. The galaxy had celebrated, believing the threat was ended forever. They were wrong. The first attack came without warning. A small colony on the edge of Keth Ari space, a mining settlement with 3,000 workers and their families. One day, it was there. The next day, it was ash. No survivors. No distress call. Just silence. Then the trade routes fell. Cargo ships vanished between systems. Supply lines that had operated safely for decades became graveyards of drifting wreckage. The Vreckener did not announce themselves. They did not make demands. They simply killed and disappeared back into the darkness. Zalvaria stood in her war room, surrounded by admirals and generals and advisors who shouted over each other in rising panic. The holographic display showed her Empire 47 star systems, connected by glowing lines of commerce and communication. Red marks appeared one by one as reports came in. Another colony gone. Another fleet destroyed. Another piece of her kingdom bleeding. We must fortify the core worlds, Admiral Kethris declared. He was old and proud, decorated with medals from a dozen campaigns. Pull back our outer fleets and create a defensive perimeter. That abandons millions of citizens, General Vorzin argued. We cannot simply surrender our territory. We cannot defend everything at once, another voice shouted. The Vreckener are attacking from too many directions. Zalvaria raised her hand. The room fell silent. Show me their pattern, she commanded. Show me where they have struck and when. The holographic display shifted. Red dots appeared across her empire, each one marking a Vreckener attack. She studied them carefully, searching for meaning in the chaos. There is no pattern, Admiral Cathro said. They strike randomly. Hit and run tactics. Classic Vreckener savagery. Perhaps, Zelvaria murmured. But something about the attacks troubled her. Something she could not quite name. She turned to look at Danny. Her husband stood in the corner of the war room, silent and unnoticed. He had been there for the entire briefing, watching the displays with eyes that missed nothing. The nobles and officers ignored him. The cargo hauler had no place in military discussions. But Zelvaria had learned to watch him when no one else did. His face was pale. His hands were clenched at his sides, and his eyes moved across the holographic display with a speed and focus that made her breath catch. "Danny," she said quietly, "what do you see?" Every head in the room turned toward him. Admiral Kethros made a sound of disgust. "Your Majesty, this is hardly the time for—" I asked my husband a question. Her voice was ice. "Answer me, Danny. What do you see?" For a long moment, Danny did not speak. He stepped forward slowly, approaching the holographic display like a man approaching an old enemy. The gentle farmer was gone. In his place stood someone else entirely. "Your third fleet is out of position," he said. His voice was different, harder, sharper, like a blade being drawn. "You pulled them to reinforce the Talos sector after the first wave of attacks. That was the point. The Vreckener wanted you to do that." Admiral Kethros stepped forward, his face red with anger. "How dare you? They've opened a corridor," Danny continued, ignoring him completely. "The Varus Passage. It runs from the outer territories straight to your throne world. Right now, there's nothing but a patrol squadron guarding it." He pointed at the display. "This isn't random. This is a doctrine called Shadow Advance. They make noise on the edges, while their real force moves in silence. They've been doing this for 6 months, and you've been playing exactly into their hands." The room was silent. Every officer stared at the cargo hauler, who was speaking like a military strategist. "How would you know anything about Vreckener military doctrine?" Admiral Kethros demanded. Danny turned to face him. Something shifted in his posture, a straightening of his spine, a squaring of his shoulders. Suddenly, he did not look like a farmer at all. He looked like something far more dangerous. "Because I wrote the book on fighting them," Danny said quietly. 30 years ago, during the First Contact War, I spent 4 years learning how they think, how they move, how they kill. And I have spent another 4 years teaching humanity how to kill them back." Zelvaria's heart was pounding. "Danny, what are you saying?" He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw the truth in his eyes. No masks, no gentle smiles. Just a man who had carried a terrible weight for a very long time. "My real name is Lieutenant Commander Daniel Reese Cole," he said. "Calcine Ghost. I was the commanding officer of the Black Watch Humanities Classified Special Operations Unit during the war. Every mission the Vreckeners still have nightmares about? That was me. That was my team." The room erupted. Officers shouting, demanding proof, calling him a liar. But Zelvaria saw Varthan in the corner, working furiously at a data terminal, searching records that should not exist, finding the truth that had been buried. "He is telling the truth," Varthan announced. His voice cut through the chaos. "The Black Watch files are classified beyond anything I have ever seen. But the name Ghost appears in Vreckener intelligence reports. They called him the Shadow that kills. They believed he was a demon, not a man." Zelvaria looked at her husband, the cargo hauler, the gardener, the quiet man who had slept beside her for months. She had always known he was hiding something. She had never imagined it was this. "Why?" she asked. "Why did humanity send you here?" Danny's eyes were heavy with old pain. "Because after the war, I retired. I was broken, Zell. I had done terrible things in the name of survival. I wanted to disappear. to find peace. He paused. When the Alliance Treaty was signed, humanity's intelligence services knew you would need protection. Threats would come that you would never see. They needed someone who could guard you from the shadows. Someone invisible. Someone already dead inside. He smiled, but there was no joy in it. I was the only candidate. The ghost who couldn't die. A new alert flashed on the holographic display. A massive Reckoner fleet had just entered the Varus Passage. They were heading straight for the throne world. Danny turned to face the display, and Zelvaria watched the last traces of the gentle farmer disappear. You have maybe 40 hours before they reach orbit, he said. Your defensive fleet won't be enough. The Reckoner commander is using a formation I recognize. It's designed to absorb losses while the capital ships punch through to their target. He looked at the assembled officers. But they've made a mistake. They think humanity has forgotten how to fight. They think 30 years of peace made us weak. His voice dropped to something cold and terrible. They're about to remember why they ran the first time. Zelvaria stepped forward and took his hand. Tell us what to do, she said. Danny looked at her, his wife. His queen, the woman he had been lying to for half a year. And she saw something in his eyes that surprised her. Fear, not of the enemy. Fear of what she would think of him when she saw who he really was. I need you to trust me, he said. Can you do that? She squeezed his hand. Show me who you really are, she said. All of it. Danny Colghost took a deep breath. Then he turned to face the war room, and the real battle began. The war room had changed. Where chaos had ruled an hour ago. Now there was focused silence. Officers bent over terminals, running calculations. Admirals studied tactical displays with new understanding. And at the center of it all stood Danny Cola, man none of them had noticed before, now commanding their complete attention. Zelvaria watched her husband work. He moved through the holographic displays like a musician playing an instrument, pulling up fleet positions, enemy formations, supply lines, and defensive grids. His voice was calm and steady, issuing orders that the highest-ranking officers followed without question. Recall the 4th Fleet from the Talos sector, Danny said. Tell them to burn their engines at maximum. I don't care if they arrive with empty fuel tanks. I need those ships. That will leave Talos undefended. Admiral Kethros objected, but his voice lacked its earlier anger. He had seen Danny dissect the Reckonar's strategy in minutes. He knew he was dealing with something beyond his understanding. Talos is a distraction, Danny replied. The Reckonar have already moved past it. They're committed to their assault on the throne world. By the time they realize we've shifted forces, it will be too late for them to respond. He turned to a communications officer. Open a secure channel to human space. Priority code black. Tell them Ghost is calling. The officer hesitated. Sir, I don't have clearance for. You do now. Danny's voice left no room for argument. Tell them I'm activating Protocol Lazarus. They'll know what it means. Zelvaria moved closer to him. What is Protocol Lazarus? Danny did not look away from the displays. During the war, we established hidden reserves. Ships, soldiers, weapons that officially don't exist. Emergency forces that were never decommissioned, just hidden away in case the Reckonar ever came back. He allowed himself a small, bitter smile. We always knew they would. Enemies like that don't stay beaten forever. You have been planning for this for 30 years? Humanity has been planning for this. I just happen to know the codes. He finally turned to face her. Zell, what I'm about to do, what I'm about to become, it's not pretty. The man you married, the gardener who talked about flowers and read books in the library, that man is real. But he's not all I am. There's another part of me. A darker part. I need to let it out if we're going to survive this. She studied his face. The gentle brown eyes were still there, But something else lurked behind them now. Something cold and calculating and utterly without mercy. "Do what you have to do," she said. "I will not look away." Danny nodded slowly. Then he turned back to the war room and let the monster out. For the next 12 hours, Zelvaria watched her husband become someone else entirely. He coordinated fleets across dozens of star systems with impossible precision. He predicted Reckoner movements before they happened. He identified weaknesses in enemy formations that experienced admirals had missed completely. Every order he gave was followed. Every strategy he proposed was implemented without question. But it was not his tactical genius that shook her. It was the stories that began to emerge. Officers who had served during the First Contact War recognized his call sign. They gathered in corners and spoke in hushed voices about Ghost the Shadow, who had turned the tide of the war. The Battle of Wreck. Prime, Ghost and a team of 12 soldiers had infiltrated the enemy's most heavily defended fortress world. They had destroyed the central command structure, killing over 200 Reckoner officers in a single night. Only 4 of his team survived. The Reckoner had put a bounty on Ghost's head worth more than most planets. The silence of Station Omega, a human research station, had been captured. Its personnel held hostage. Ghost had gone in alone. When rescue ships arrived 3 days later, they found every Reckoner soldier dead and the hostages unharmed. Ghost had not slept, eaten, or rested for 72 hours. He had simply killed until there was no one left to kill. The impossible extraction at Demon's Gate. A battalion of human soldiers trapped behind enemy lines, surrounded by a Reckoner army 10 times their size. Ghost had led the rescue mission himself. He had walked through enemy territory like smoke, opening paths, creating chaos, turning the Reckoner's own weapons against them. 3,000 soldiers made it home because of him. Zelvaria listened to these stories and looked at the man she had married. The man who grew flowers and remembered her mother's death anniversary. The man who washed dishes with servants and smiled at everyone he met. How? She asked him during a brief pause in the planning. How can you be both? The gardener and the ghost? Danny looked at her with tired eyes. The gardener is who I want to be. The ghost is who I had to become. He paused, choosing his words carefully. When the war started, I was just a kid from a small colony. I had never fired a weapon. I had never seen anyone die. But the Reckoner didn't care about that. They came from my home, my family, everyone I loved. So I learned to fight. I learned to kill. I got very, very good at it. And after the war, I tried to forget. I tried to become someone else, someone who built things instead of destroying them. Someone who could sleep without nightmares. His voice was soft and sad. When humanity asked me to come here, to protect you, I thought maybe I could finally be the gardener full time. Just watch over you quietly and let the ghost stay buried. He looked out the window at the stars. But some things can't stay buried forever. The human ships arrived 18 hours later. They came from hidden bases, scattered across the galaxy vessels that had been waiting in cold storage for 30 years. Black-hulled warships with no markings, carrying soldiers who had answered the call of a legend. Zelvaria stood on the palace observation deck and watched them fill the sky. Hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers. An army that officially did not exist, summoned by a man who officially was dead. Danny stood beside her. Dressed now in a uniform, she did not recognize black fabric with silver trim. A single rank insignia on his collar. These are the survivors, he said. Men and women who served under me during the war. When I put out the call, they came. Some of them are old now. Some of them have families. But they came anyway, because they remember what we fought for. They came for you, Zelvaria said. Not for the war. For you. Danny shook his head. They came because the Reckoner are back. They came because someone has to stop them. I just happened to be the one who asked. But she saw how the soldiers looked at him when they arrived. She saw the way they straightened when he walked past, the way they spoke his call sign with something close to reverence. These were not just soldiers following orders. These were warriors who would follow their commander into hell itself, because they had done it before. And they had survived. The War Council convened one final time before the battle. Every admiral, every general, every officer who would command forces in the coming fight gathered around the holographic display. Danny stood at its center, surrounded by the might of two empires. The Reckoner fleet will arrive in 6 hours, he said. They outnumber us nearly 3-1. Their commander is experienced and careful. He won't make obvious mistakes. He looked around the room at the faces watching him. But he has made one critical error. He thinks he's fighting the same humanity that barely survived the first war. He thinks we've gone soft. Danny reached out and touched the display. The enemy fleet appeared, vast and terrible, filling the space between worlds. He's wrong. We haven't forgotten how to fight. We've just been waiting for a reason. His voice dropped to something cold and hard. I'm going to give them that reason. And when this is over, the Reckoner will remember why they ran 30 years ago. They will remember that humanity doesn't just survive. He looked at Zelvaria across the room. His eyes were the eyes of the ghost, now empty and deadly and completely without fear. Humanity wins. The Reckoner fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of hungry insects. Hundreds of ships filled the void around Kethari, prime massive dreadnoughts bristling with weapons, sleek destroyers moving in hunting packs, troop carriers holding tens of thousands of soldiers ready to invade. Admiral Verkith commanded the invasion force from his flagship, the Devourer. He was old for a Reckoner, scarred and patient, a survivor of the First Contact War who had spent 3 decades preparing for revenge. His spies had told him that the Kethari Queen had married a weak human farmer. His intelligence reports confirmed that humanity's military had grown soft after years of peace. This would be easy, he thought. Break the Kethari fleet, burn the throne world, and remind the galaxy why the Reckoner Dominion was feared. Then his sensors detected the Second Fleet. Human ships. Hundreds of them. Black-hulled vessels with no markings, emerging from positions that should have been empty. They moved with the precision of a single organism, falling into formation around the Kethari defenders. Where did they come from? Verkith demanded. His officers scrambled to answer. The human ships had not traveled through any monitored hyperspace lanes. They had simply appeared, like ghosts materializing from the void. Then his communications officer went pale. Admiral, we are receiving a transmission. It is broadcasting on all frequencies. The sender call sign is... He paused, checking his console twice. The call sign is Ghost. Verkith felt cold fear grip his chest. Ghost. He remembered that name. Every Reckoner who had survived the First Contact War remembered that name. It was whispered in nightmares. It was the reason his people had retreated into dark space for 30 years. Put it through, he commanded. A human face appeared on the view screen. Brown eyes, plain features, hair cut short and practical. He could have been any human. He could have been nobody. But he was not nobody. Admiral Verkith, Danny said. His voice was calm, almost conversational. I remember you. The Battle of Varus III. You were captain of a destroyer back then. I let your ship escape because I wanted someone to carry a message back to your people. Verkith's claws dug into his command chair. What message? That humanity remembers. That we have not forgotten what you did. That we have been waiting. Danny leaned forward slightly. And that ghost never really died. The transmission ended. The battle began. Zelvaria watched from the command center of her palace as the fleets collided. The holographic display showed ships moving in complex patterns, exchanging fire, maneuvering for advantage. Explosions bloomed like flowers in the void. Danny stood at the center of it all, conducting the battle like a symphony of destruction. Third formation, break left. Draw their destroyers away from the carrier group. Fourth formation, hold position until their dreadnoughts commit. Then hit their flanks. His orders flowed continuously, each one precise. Each one timed perfectly. The Cathari admirals had expected chaos. They had expected desperate defense. Instead, they watched a master tactician dismantle the Reckoner fleet piece by piece. Danny did not fight like their admirals did. He did not seek glory or honor. He fought like a hunter, patient and ruthless. He let the Reckoner advance into traps. He sacrificed positions to create openings. He turned every enemy attack into an opportunity. 3 hours into the battle, the Reckoner fleet had lost a third of its ships. But they pressed forward, driven by hatred and fear of retreat. Admiral Verkith pushed everything toward the throne world, knowing that if he could break through and take the palace, nothing else would matter. His command ship, the Devourer, led the charge. A massive vessel, armored like a fortress, carrying enough firepower to crack open a planet. The defending fleet threw everything they had at it, but the Devourer kept coming. "It's going to break through," Admiral Kethros reported, his voice tight with fear. "We can't stop it in time." Danny stared at the display. His face was empty, calculating. Then he made his decision. "Open the hangar bay," he said. "Prepare a fighter. Single pilot." Zelvaria grabbed his arm. "What are you doing?" He looked at her. The coldness in his eyes melted for just a moment, replaced by something warm and sad. "What I was always trained to do," he said. "What I came here for." He pulled away before she could stop him. The fighter was old, a human model from the First Contact War, kept in storage with the other hidden reserves. It was barely held together, patched and repaired a dozen times over the decades. But it was fast, and it was small, and in the right hands it could do impossible things. Danny climbed into the cockpit and sealed the canopy. The engine hummed to life beneath him. He took a breath, letting the familiar feeling settle into his bones. Then he launched into the void. The defending ships parted to let him through. The Reckoner were too focused on their push toward the planet to notice one tiny fighter streaking through the chaos. Danny flew like he had 30 years ago, dodging debris, weaving between capital ships. Moving with the precision of a surgical instrument, he reached the Devourer in 4 minutes. The massive ship's point defense systems tried to track him, but he was too fast, too unpredictable. He danced through the weapon's fire like smoke through grasping fingers. Then he was on the hull, his fighter's emergency clamps locking onto the metal surface. "Goes to command," he said over the radio. "I'm on the Devourer. Going dark." He cut his communications. Then he opened the canopy, sealed his helmet, and stepped onto the enemy ship. What happened next would become legend. No one saw it directly. There were no recordings, no witnesses. But the results spoke for themselves. 30 minutes after Danny Cole boarded the Devourer, the ship's engines died. Its weapons went silent. Its communications cut off. Then, slowly, the great vessel began to drift. Admiral Verkith's last transmission reached the remaining Reckoner fleet. It was not a command. It was a scream, a sound of pure terror that echoed across every frequency. Then silence. When Cathari boarding teams entered the Devourer an hour later, they found every Reckoner officer dead. Admiral Verkith was on the bridge, his claws still gripping his command chair, his face frozen in an expression of absolute horror. And Danny Cole was sitting in the pilot's seat of an escape pod. Waiting for pickup. He did not speak about what had happened inside. He would never speak about it. But the message was clear. Ghost had returned. And he had not forgotten how to be terrifying. The remaining Vrekinar fleet retreated. They fled into the darkness of deep space, their invasion shattered, their leaders dead. Their certainty of victory turned to ash. The Battle of Keth-Ari Prime was over. The Alliance had won. The celebrations lasted for weeks. Parades filled the streets of the throne world. Danny Cole was hailed as a hero across 2 empires. The nobles who had mocked him now bowed when he passed. Officers who had dismissed him begged for his wisdom. He hated every moment of it. When the ceremonies ended and the dignitaries departed, Zelvaria found him in the palace garden. He was kneeling in the dirt, tending a row of small white flowers that had just begun to bloom. His hands were gentle, careful, coaxing life from the soil. She sat down beside him, not caring that her royal robes touched the earth. "You saved us all," she said. "You could have anything you want now. Command of my fleets, a seat on the High Council, your own star system." Danny did not look up from his flowers. "I had command once," he said quietly. "I know what it costs. I've buried too many friends." He brushed soil from his hands and finally met her eyes. "I just want to grow things now. Watch them live instead of die." Zelvaria reached out and took his hand. The hand that had killed dozens of enemy soldiers hours ago. The hand that had tended her garden for months. The same hand. "You're still a strange choice for a consort," she said. Danny smiled. It was the gentle smile she had first seen when he stepped off the transport ship, the smile of a man who had nothing left to prove and nothing left to hide. "But I'm your strange choice," he said. She leaned against his shoulder, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, the Vrekinar licked their wounds and remembered why they had feared humanity. Somewhere out there, soldiers told stories about Ghost, the shadow who could not be killed. But here, in the palace garden of the Keth-Ari throne world, there was only a man and his wife, planting flowers in the dirt. "I love you," Zelvaria said. "The gardener and the ghost. All of you." Danny was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I never thought I'd hear anyone say that. Not after everything I've done." She squeezed his hand. "Then you will hear it every day for the rest of your life. Until you believe it." Above them, the stars shone peacefully for the first time in months. The war was over. The darkness had retreated. And in a garden on a distant world, a retired soldier finally found something he had been searching for his entire life. Peace. Not the peace of empty silence or forgotten pain, but the peace that comes from being known completely all. The light in all the shadows and being loved. Anyway, Danny Cole closed his eyes and let himself believe it was real. And for the first time in 30 years, the ghost finally rested.